Violence in video games. It's been the bane of many a politician over the years, and Australia has been no exception. Depiction of blood and gore started early with games like Chiller and Barbarian in 1986. They quickly became a niche that spawned Mortal Kombat, Doom, and the one that changed everything, Sega's Night Trap on the Mega CD.
I don't believe what I just saw.
These titles horrified Aussie Senator Margaret Reynolds, sparking her to launch a campaign to restrict access to games with adult themes.
No way in which parents can have any assurances about the type of material that their children are having access to.
By 1994, Australia's earliest video game rating system was formed. This resulted in the classic G to MA15 Plus system that lasted for around 8 years until 2002.
The state and federal governments are to ban explicit violence and sex in video games. The move follows a public outcry over the increasingly gruesome games available in Australia.
When games like Manhunt, The Punisher and Narc were refused classification in Australia, an amendment was proposed for the addition of an R18 Plus rating. Down under, any changes to this system must be unanimously agreed upon by the Commonwealth and state ministers, and they all agreed that an R18 rating was needed. However, there was one lone holdout. South Australian Attorney-General Michael Atkinson. He was against the portrayal of violence in video games, believing that gamers were taking part in the actions on screen rather than just passively viewing them. He wasn't a core gamer, though admitted to enjoying Wii games from time to time, and also had children that played them. His concerns were understandable, as certain titles like the questionable Japan-only Rape Play have abhorrent themes in them that aren't welcome in any type of media. He feared the Australian Classification Board would abuse the rating system to allow these types of games in.
I have no trust in the Classification Board to apply the guidelines sincerely or correctly, and therefore to draw up such guidelines would be to draw them up in sure of certain knowledge that they would be stretched and then broken.
However, he had made the mistake of dictating his opinion over the wider public, most notably the opinion of Aussie gamers. It was around this time that a South Australian who wants to be known as Kakashi Sensei became aware of the situation and formulated a plan to sway Atkinson into relenting. He crafted a note made up of various paper clippings to hide his handwriting. The note read like this: "Hey old man Atkinson, this act of vandalism is an expression of the frustration of your refusal to allow an R18 rating for games. Who the f*** are you to tell adults what they can and can't play?" The plan was to slide the note under the door, then throw eggs all over the office. He wore a scarf to hide his identity, and even went as far as to tape up his car's registration number. The night of the super secret Black Ops mission arrived, and Kakashi headed to Atkinson's office around 2 a.m. He slid the note under the door and began walking back to his car to grab the eggs when the door opened behind him. What the bloody hell is all this about? It turned out Atkinson had been working late that night. Kakashi bolted back to his car and took off in a cloud of dust. Over the next year, Atkinson seemed visibly rattled by the experience and, appearing on an episode of ABC's Good Game, he likened Aussie gamers to local bikie gangs, which made him sound unhinged, and slowly but surely, the wheels of public opinion began turning against him.
About 2 o'clock in the morning, I had a threatening note from a gamer shoved under my door. I feel that my family and I are more at risk from gamers than we are from the outlaw motorcycle gangs who also hate me and are running a candidate against me.
He claimed the note included death threats towards his family. Kakashi strongly denies this, and seeing as how Atkinson wouldn't show the note publicly, I tend to believe him. A couple of years later, in 2010, a new political party was established called Gamers for Croyden that sought to remove Atkinson and acquire the fabled R18 Plus rating for Australia. They were led by founder David Doe and co-founder Chris Pryor, with Kat Nicholson being the candidate for the seat of Croyden. They argued that many R18 titles from other countries were being released in Australia under the MA15 Plus classification and were receiving no edits in doing so. Indeed, games like Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 had R18 classification overseas, which were then reduced to MA15+ in Australia in order to get them onto store shelves. Gamers for Croyden stated it was about giving Aussies the tools to make informed decisions about what type of content they and their children enjoyed.
This isn't about getting more violence into video games. This is just about labelling it appropriately so that people buying video games for their children or their grandchildren understand the type of content that's in them.
They also argued that the average age for a gamer in Australia was 29 to 30 years old, and that Atkinson was ignoring the information and dictating his personal opinion to the Australian public. They worked tirelessly for the good of Aussie gamers everywhere and must be commended. Starting a grassroots political party is not an easy thing to achieve. Backlash against the Attorney General began to form in earnest, and consumers and game makers alike stood unanimously for the rating system reform. There was even a browser game created where you could play as Atkinson and attempt to block content from Australian society. It's absolutely hilarious. In 2010, after much debate, Atkinson won the election but suffered a 15.6% swing against him. Kat Nicholson had secured 3.7% of the vote, creating a visible dent in his campaign. Perhaps Gamers for Croyden and Kakashi Sensei had damaged his reputation. At this point, Atkinson finally decided to step down to spend more time with his family, later telling Kotaku Australia that he knew Gamers for Croyden would win in the end. His successor, John Rao, was very receptive to the idea of an R18 rating for video games down under. And so, by 2013, Australia's very first R-rated game hit store shelves. Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge for Nintendo Wii U. Gamers everywhere rejoiced. It had finally happened, they had won. This resulted in a cool Easter egg placed by Valve into the R-rated Left 4 Dead 2 as thanks to the many people who stood up and helped to change Australia for the better. That is awesome. Kakashi was concerned he had made too much of an impact on Atkinson's personal life. He had only meant to get a very serious point across with the note, and apologises if it impacted the man's family in any way. Regardless, his note was a strong catalyst for a huge change in Australia, and he deserves our thanks for putting himself on the line to deliver the message so many Aussies wanted to deliver. Let adults enjoy certain content at their own discretion while protecting children from it at the same time. Good on ya, Kakashi. Even so, the industry still had issues with questionable content. South Park The Stick of Truth was nearly refused classification altogether, until it was censored with these hilarious cars that trolled the Australian Classification Board. Mortal Kombat 9 was another one. Some of the more recent controversies include Hotline Miami 2, Katana Zero, and Disco Elysium, and I'm certain there will be more. If you look at the trend of recently banned games in Australia, there are far more that get refused classification these days than ever before. Mr. Atkinson's fears about the ratings board not doing their jobs have been proven to be unjustified. Actually, the latest controversy sees Australia moving towards R18 and M15+ ratings for games containing gambling and loot boxes. This is a great idea, as the introduction of these elements in popular games like FIFA and Fortnite are all about draining money from individuals and are simply not necessary. On the other hand, imagine if Super Mario Bros. 2 was classified R18+ because of its roulette minigame. Video games are a special synesthesia of art, sound and themes. They use technology to tell stories and create experiences that speak to people about certain issues, mostly informative and entertaining, sometimes confronting, and at times, simply ridiculous. They are also created by corporations that make a lot of money. The indie scene differs from this in that the games are usually a much more personal experience. In the end, it comes down to what the creators of video games are trying to express and how users view the content themselves. God of War Ragnarok is a AAA title that seeks to tell the story of a father with a checkered past, raising his child in the best way he can to prepare him for the future. It speaks to players about what they would consider important, and shows that anyone has the capacity to change and can become better people for it. Then you have games that are just outright violent and abhorrent for the sake of it. Personally, I'm glad Stick of Truth was censored, as I don't think those scenes were necessary for the overall enjoyment of the game. But that is my opinion, and I'm sure everyone has their own. Let me know some of them in the comments below. It took a bunch of fantastic individuals to tackle this long-standing issue, and every one of them deserves our praise, from Kakashi Sensei to Gamers for Croyden. They pushed the limits in just the right way, spurring a positive change that would last into the future. Thanks for your hard work, everyone, and as always, thanks for watching. I'd just like to give a shout out to Unstoppable Exodia, who got me in touch with Kakashi Sensei and prompted this video. If anyone else has any cool Aussie gaming stories they want covered, pop a comment down below and we'll go from there. I'm just glad I can be of use in some way, no matter how obscure the channel is. Thanks for having confidence in me, guys, it means the world to me. Cheers, and I'll see yous in the next one.